The Elden Ring, and it's a sequel to a video game that came out a few years ago called Dark Souls.
I, like many people upon seeing this interview, immediately assumed that J.R.R. Martin did not know hardly anything about the From Software franchise. But when you look into his involvement inside of Elden Ring and the fact that he contributed almost half of the story, it makes you wonder if there was any truth to what he was saying. And that is exactly what we are going to be tackling in today's video. Tackling the plausibility of what J.R.R. Martin said. Now, just a quick TLDR for you all. There is a really high chance that it was simply human error with J.R.R. Martin in this interview, or that he simply did not know anything about From Software's past games apart from the ever-famous Dark Souls. The first connection that pops out to me would have to be both Elden Ring and Dark Souls heavy plot points to do with trees. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, in Dark Souls 1, 2 and 3 there are something called arch trees, which are the pillars of each world. Each tree is a completely different world. Elden Ring has the Erd tree and its predecessor the Great Tree, and possibly infinite other trees we do not know about. Not to mention both the minor Erd trees, which are children saplings of the Erd tree, and the two trees which are seen inside the Shadow of the Erd tree trailer. Both games seem to take a lot of inspiration in their obsession with trees from the Yggdrasil, also known as the World Tree inside of Norse mythology. The World Tree whose roots spread across all time and space. Now, if it was just this point alone, then you could chalk it up to From Software just taking inspiration and using it in multiple different games. But there's more. In Elden Ring, fog plays a very much important role inside the lore. Fog is from which we travel through to enter the lands between in the very first place. Without fog, there would be no Beyond the Fog, which plays a very key role inside the story of the Tarnished and possibly even the DLC. In the same vein, inside of Dark Souls 1's opening cinematic, there's a very much overlooked piece of dialogue where it talks about how in the Age of Ancients the world was shrouded in grey fog. Now, what is the significance of this? A lot of people who are looking into the lore of these games will tell you that this is probably nothing and just a slight piece of dialogue, but I believe there is so much more to this. If you see, in Dark Souls 1, when the Lords come and their godly essence comes, the fog is dispersed. Sound familiar? The lands between is basically an island that is completely surrounded and isolated by the fog. Why is this the case? Well, we're not given an answer, but if we go off the fact of how the fog acts inside of Dark Souls 1, it gives the connotation that perhaps the fact that the outer gods seem to absolutely love the lands between, maybe their presence and the plethora of forces beyond our comprehension, maybe their presence is what leads to this dispersion of the fog, leaving this sort of dead zone for the actual fog. Now, I'm going to give you an example to hopefully try and help you understand a bit more. If you've ever done chemistry, then you'll know about petri dishes. Petri dishes are used to cultivate bacteria, right? Once you've cultivated the bacteria, the main point of it is to test, say, antibiotics on it. You get the cultivated bacteria and on a little piece of dish you put this antibiotic and see how well the antibiotic does at repelling the bacteria. Now, I believe that at least the lands between, if not the Dark Souls world as well, is a direct example of this. I believe that the worlds of Elden Ring and Dark Souls are like a petri dish, and the outer godly influence of, say, the First Flame, or the Greater Will, or the Frenzied Flame, their influence is like antibiotics. Their influence kills the fog, aka bacteria, and then eventually, like any antibiotic, it reaches its radius of effect, which then leads to the, say, circular shape you see in petri dishes and, you guessed it, the lands between. You might be thinking, oh well, that's fine and dandy for Elden Ring, but what about Dark Souls? Well, I truly believe that this is also the case for Dark Souls. We are told so much about different lands all throughout Dark Souls' franchise. Would it be so far-fetched to think that maybe their petri dish is just simply so far away we don't even know about it? You might be thinking as well, why is that the case? Well, in Dark Souls, we only are really hinted at about one god, one outer god. But is it even an outer god? It's more than that. The first flame is beyond outer gods. You see, in Elden Ring, outer gods are fragments of something called the One Great. Now, a long time ago, this One Great was all of the outer gods. So, if Elden Ring and Dark Souls are connected, at one point in time, the outer gods were not outer gods, and instead one being. So, what is this one being? Well, maybe this one being is in fact the entity that gave Gwyn and the Lords the first flame. We don't have a name for it because it's never given one, but I find it very unlikely that just randomly this first flame came about. In my eyes, and in my theory, it's my belief that perhaps this unfeeling One Great in its unfeeling land grew placid and bored, and wanted to see what something with feeling would truly look like. So, it gave man and the giants the first flame, and from this, the world of Dark Souls is created. And eventually, eons later, at the end of the world, everything is ash again. Everything is unfeeling again, ripe for countless upon countless upon countless of eons of unfeeling, until the One Great, aka this entity, became split and turned into the outer gods, resulting in what we know as, say, the greater will, the frenzied flame, you name it. Another similarity being that inside of all of the outer gods in Elden Ring, they all have their chosen godly kind of being. The Formless Mother has Moog, the Scarlet Rot outer god has Malenia, the Greater Will has Marika, and when we come to Dark Souls, it seems that Gwyn is this equivalent to the entity that is possibly the One Great. Before we go any further, I just wanted to say, if you are enjoying this video, and only if you are enjoying this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. I do all sorts of content like this on the channel. I think we have about 65 lore videos, so plenty of content to dig in if you'd like that. In my videos, I like to try and cover all bases to make sure that we've got all the points of view inside this video. So, I want to play devil's advocate and say, maybe the beginning of Dark Souls is in fact when this giant rift started. We know the outer god named the Greater Will brought feeling into the world against the wishes of the One Great from which it came. Maybe the One Great is in fact a split off outer god from the One Great. Maybe in the beginning of this split it wasn't multiple outer gods, but in fact just two. Maybe different outer gods split at different times. We really don't know. There is so many possibilities that could happen with this that it's hard to really say which one is more likely when all the evidence suggests to both of them. The next thing I'd like to talk about has to do with something we talked about earlier that you may or may not have forgotten about. The arch trees and the Erd. I'm at the very end of recording. I have done all the editing, and it's only in post-production that it clicked in my head that actually in the Elden Beast boss battle, things that look like multiple upon multiple Erd trees are seen, which is very reminiscent of what Ash Lake looks like and all the places where arch trees actually are. This adds even more evidence to the fact that this theory is true. And I was going to put it in the pinned comment as I'd forgotten, but I just couldn't not mention it in the actual video. Now you see, the arch trees, each world, from what we understand, is a different world. Each tree is its own self-contained world. Now, if the Erd tree and the minor Erd trees are the same thing as the arch trees, it tells us so much about the vast power that these trees hold. If the Erd tree is a fully grown arch tree, that means that this world is its self-contained world, and that tells us so much, especially since the Shadow of the Erd Tree DLC seems to take place in some other world, perhaps beyond the fog, in its own little petri dish. Who knows? Another thing that links into the prowess of these minor Erd trees, that when they grow into actual full great trees, you've got to think, Miquella's tree, it's theorised, and we've theorised, and multiple people have theorised, that Miquella's Halig tree is one big bewitching branch. If this is the case about the prowess of these Erd tree clones, then that would make so much sense about it having the power to broadcast a bewitching branch all across the lands between. It's a massive bit of wishful thinking, but I really do hope we get something to do with this in the DLC, although I highly doubt we actually will. I think it's a really cool premise, and I would honestly absolutely love to see this happen. Please bear in mind that this is a video that the whole premise is we are speculating because George R.R. Martin said something that very much suggested that Dark Souls and Elden Ring were connected. This is not 100% fact by a very, very long shot. So please bear that in mind before you take this on as pure fact. Sadly everyone, that is the end of the video. I've honestly really loved talking about this today. I don't think it's very often we go into Dark Souls lore. It's mostly Elden Ring, so it was really, really nice to do that. If you'd like to see more like this, then please let me know down below, as I'd be very, very happy to do that. I think Elden Ring's lore is absolutely amazing, but the other series inside of From Software's repertoire is also equally as good. I'm not going to hold you any longer. I know I do ramble a little bit inside of the outro, but I just wanted to say I'm really sorry if my voice was a bit croaky. I'm still really ill. I've got confirmed vasculitis now, which is the thing I mentioned in the last video, and I've just been quite under the weather. But to be fair, I am feeling a lot better than I did a few days ago, which I am really grateful for. As some comments have said before, I did try to uninstall my accent. It didn't seem to work though, so I'm really sorry about that. Anyway, yeah, I'm not going to hold you any longer, as I said, so I really do hope you have a great rest of your day, and yeah, may you find your worth in the waking world. Goodbye everyone.